This segment of the Indigenous Languages Series was filmed in the Canadian Museum for Human Rights, situated on ancestral land on Treaty 1 territory. Robert Maytwayashing is Anishinaabe, raised in his people on the Lake Manitoba First Nation located in the Interlake Region of Manitoba. Robert is a pipe carrier, sweat lodge keeper, and attends the annual ceremony of Sundance. Robert has also hosted warrior lodges and eagle dances, to name a few. Over the years, Robert has served his Lake Manitoba First Nation community as both a council member and as a chief. Robert was also a health director in 2 First Nation communities and the senior health policy analyst for the Assembly of Manitoba Chiefs.
Hello, my relatives, my relations. My traditional name is Strong Standing Red Buffalo. I'm of the Bear Clan. My English name is Robert. My family name is Maytwayashing. I want to talk about Hainun Detashin Danshegoi. Kawawi Indeke gu Anin Hejiwawi Indek Shigo Anin I took Kajiwin Damwat ke gu Howe Kawai Te Yak Kaiteo Ma Ipmosiot Mi Ekwig up Mitashindan. I want to talk about the names of some places here in the land we now call Canada, and just how they're, for the most part, terms found in different Indigenous languages. The names of places in particular, as I stated. Like Canada, many of us have seen those vignettes on TV where you have a missionary and some earlier explorers coming across some, I'm guessing, Mohawks or Iroquois peoples, and they're asking the question of this chief where they are, what this place is called, and he's answering back Canada. And the priest that's with the explorer is telling the explorer that this place is called Canada. And whereas in reality, Canada actually just means village. It's a term used to describe village. So that's one way of how we came to be called or known as the country we now call Canada. Misagutas ngap mitebachim haningi night when Jesus katamin Canada yegan snabeam. Netamigui tukabitagus nwat o wekush maiyak muniagain wapshkia. Appeji tukibachago nagusebeje ki joguninan. Igusana nikki tukowek kauskitagus minen tamigo job mot away ki joguninan appejiga bachago naguset. Gene ni megunga kiname na veking. Aisanga isimache ke tuang pin tamigo ya gosh got ge kushka komagita usnot. Kanata ke gachi nemi gong miakine na bekke. Mitas kweminong mian kan kanajami. Within my own people we have a story of how this land came to be known as Canada. When we seen the newcomers arrive on our lands, on our shores out over in the East Coast, and they started to make way for the shore in their smaller boats off the big ships, I guess amongst us we had one very peculiar and funny looking individual amongst us. And the fear that we had was that he would be the first person that these newcomers would see and then assume that's how we all looked. So within our language we started to relay a message amongst ourselves pertaining to this fellow of ours. Kanata. In our language, kanata means hide him. And I guess when the newcomers came here, they overheard us in the trees saying out, Kanata. So they assumed that they were on a land called Canada. So that's our version of how Canada got its name. Okay? Now, pertaining to names of other places, this evening I find myself in the city of Winnipeg. The proper pronunciation of Winnipeg is actually Winnipeg. And Winnipeg is describing the two rivers that meet here at the Forks, the Assiniboine, which drains into the Red River. And because of the high silt amongst the agricultural lands of which drain into these two rivers are very gray and dirty looking. There's a lot of silt in them. In our language, Winnipeg means something that's very dirty or muddy, pertaining to water. And that's how Winnipeg got its name. And then when you look at our province, Manitoba, there's different stories about how Manitoba came to be. The area I come from, Lake Manitoba First Nation, on the shores of Lake Manitoba, there's a place about 20 minutes drive away from me, a little further northwest, known as the Narrows, where the north and south basins narrow to a small channel for the water to flow through between these two basins of Lake Manitoba. And in that area, there's an island there that they call Manitou Island or something, Creator Island. And the story there is that when the waves would break and hit on the shore, it almost sounded like a drum or thunder. So it's said that it was called Manitoba because of that particular island, or the island where the Great Spirit lives. But I think that was a non-Indigenous interpretation of the term Manitoba, because to my understanding and what I've been told by my elders, the correct interpretation of where the name Manitoba came from is this: Manitou Bang, the place where the Creator sat, which is in direct reference to a sacred site that we have here in Manitoba in the Whiteshell area, where there are many petroforms that are throughout a bigger rock that is in that area, where our people have been doing ceremony for thousands upon thousands of years. And it's even said that that's where our people originated and then migrated from, is that particular area, Manitou Bang, the place where the Creator sat. And that's how this province came to be known as Manitoba. And then you have streets in some of our cities. And the one that comes to my mind here in Winnipeg, Kiwetin. But everybody doesn't pronounce it like that. They pronounce it Kiwetin. But actually it's Kiwetin. And what that is saying is it's referencing a north wind. And it's ironic that Kiwetin actually runs north-south, right? And that's how that street got its name. There's a little town between Brandon and Portage la Prairie known as Neepawa. When you enter that town, they have their town welcoming sign as you enter the town, and it says Neepawa. And underneath it says the land of plenty. And again, that is an Indigenous term. Proper pronunciation, Neepawa, which in reference or in translation basically means there's a lot of something, i.e. the land of plenty, right? Then you have other cities like Ottawa, right? Our capital, Ottawa. The proper pronunciation is Ottawa, Ottawa. And it's referencing one faction of my people, the Anishinaabe, that hung around that area during the early fur trade. And they were the traders, some of the initial traders of our people with the newcomers. Because Ottawa in our language means to buy or to trade. And that's how Ottawa got its name. And there's towns like Saskatoon, again in reference to that berry, Saskatoon. Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, Alberta, those are all Indigenous terms that have been anglicized. And there's stories to how those places got their names. I don't know how the city got the name of Saskatoon, but in our language we say it was Igokomin, referencing that particular berry. As I stated earlier, Alberta, that's an Indigenous term again. And that's just some examples of how the history of the first peoples of these lands are entrenched within the Canadian identity, and most Canadians haven't even got a clue. So that leads me to ask the question, what are you being taught in your schools? What are you being told with respect to your relationship to the Indigenous community and what they've contributed to the very development of this great nation we now call Canada? That question has to be asked by every single Canadian because it's a part of your makeup as a Canadian. So on another topic, I guess what I want to talk about are to us as Anishinaabe people anyway, we have what we call 7 sacred laws and or teachings represented by different animals. All right. The first teaching of our people, Manachitiwin, respect. You know, you need to respect first off yourself before you can respect others. That self-love. Before you can express that love with others and share that love with others, which is carried by the spirit of the buffalo. The buffalo, mashkote, prairie, bejeke, cow, is how we call a buffalo, mashkote, bejeke. Carries that teaching of respect. Where the buffalo gave up of itself in entirety, we used everything of that animal to help sustain us. We ate of its body. We used its bones for tools. We used its sinew for a rope or string for our bows and other things. We used its bone marrow as medicine. I actually had traditional Dakota buffalo soup, corn soup over the weekend. The hide, of course, we use it whether we use it as clothing or as a covering for our lodges. Every part of that animal was used in some way or other. And not all our people chased a buffalo. Many of our people didn't need to, like the ones that lived on a different coast as an example. Or even the Six Nations people, which were agriculturalists. They had the gardens. They had the Three Sister Society. The corn, the beans, and the squash, that's what sustained them. My people, Anishinaabe, we were part of the woodland, mainly around the Great Lakes, but then we also were on the fringes of the plains where the buffalo was. So we too utilized the buffalo, but we also utilized the elk, the moose, the deer, and if we traveled or ventured further north, the caribou, among other things. So that respect for all these things is what helped sustain us and nurture us for eons, long before our younger white brothers and sisters came on our lands. And then the second teaching of our people, carried by the spirit of the eagle, which is love. And I already mentioned that we all need to love ourselves before we can share that love with others. This world would be such a different place if we learned to love ourselves first, because then we would know how to share that love. And again, that's part of the challenge that we face as human beings throughout the world today, is we've forgotten how to love. We have let other things control our thinking and how we move forward, which are only hurting us. So we need to get back to that love. And again, the messenger of that is that eagle. So whenever you see that eagle flying in the sky, give thanks for that reminder of how you were to act day in and day out in that love. It is said the eagle is the bird that flies the highest and the closest to our great Creator, which is also why the eagle can be seen as a messenger, where the eagle can hear our prayers and help carry those prayers on its wings up toward the Great Spirit. And then we have the teaching of courage, carried by that spirit of the bear. A bear is very courageous in how it lives its life, more so the female. And they are also very protective of their young. They think nothing of giving their lives in order for their young to survive. That is courage. It is said back in the days of old, when we were in conflict with any particular people, some of our warriors, using that spirit and courage of the bear, would stake themselves to the ground in battle, that they were either going to survive that battle in defense of their people and their nation, or they would fall where they stood. That is courage. That is commitment. Ultimately, that is love for your people. Then you have the spirit of the wolf that carries that teaching of humility. Okay, go, Sam, just spend this one. Humility goes a long way in understanding how you are to walk this earth. We are to walk this earth in all humbleness, not in arrogance, not thinking that the earth is here to serve you. You are here to serve the earth. You are merely a part of the earth. So you need to humble yourself to that level. And by doing that, you are also showing the respect back to the earth. And again, all these other teachings are intertwined. And then you have the teaching of wisdom carried by that spirit of the beaver. The beaver can go into an area that is devoid of life, and through the work that the beaver does in creating its dams and flooding the lands, helps rejuvenate that area where life becomes abundant. That is the gift of the beaver, much in the same way that if the beaver does not continue to use its gift, its teeth could grow to a point where that beaver would not be able to feed itself, which is why it continues to use its teeth day in and day out, because that's part of its gift in bringing that wisdom. And wisdom comes with time. Wisdom comes with experience. Wisdom comes through those teachings of life. And for some reason, as human beings, we tend to learn the most fulfilling lessons the hardest ways. It's when we go through the hard times and we're able to go through those times that we gain the wisdom, and we're able to share that wisdom so that others don't have to suffer in the way that we did. And then you have the teaching of the Sabe in our language. You may know that as the Bigfoot, Sasquatch, whatever, and the teaching of honesty. It is said that spirit, it is a spirit, which is why to this day it has not been caught, has the freedom of movement from the physical into the spiritual realm, which is why oftentimes there'll be sightings, but very little evidence of its existence. Because it's a spirit and it carries that teaching of honesty. We need to be honest with ourselves. We need to understand and appreciate our limitations. And we need to go through those sacrifices within ceremony in order to acquire that growth that we need to make our spirit strong. That is the honesty that we need within ourselves to understand and see that and work on it. And then finally, the turtle, the spirit of the turtle that carries that teaching of truth. Your truth and my truth can be similar, but they can also be quite different, which is why we need to understand it is the spirit of the turtle that is the slowest in the physical realm, but the fastest in the spiritual world as the messenger that carries that teaching of truth. It is said it is through the spirit of the turtle that the truth will set you free. And I know other belief systems have a similar belief that the truth will set you free. It's when you don't speak your truth that you become burdened, that you become challenged to walk in a good way, which is why it is always best to express that truth. Much like the very land that we live on, the continent, North America we call it, in our language, Mikinak Menis, Turtle Island we call it. And when you look at it from space, it's almost like in the shape of a turtle. How did our people know that? There again, we have those stories, we have those connections. We have those stories of the Star Nation and the Star People, of which it is said we are descendants. So those are some of the things I just wanted to share with respect to our teachings and how to try and live a good life as a human being. And for you to consider those things, and they're applicable to all. So, miigwech.